Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you're new. My name is Kristen, this is my booktube, and apologies if you hear any bumping noises or cheering. There is a sand volleyball court right outside of my apartment and there is a rousing game going on right now and they're having a great time on this beautiful sunny morning. So if you hear any ruckus in the background, that is what it is, just a group of friends playing some sand volleyball. So we love that for them, but we are here today to talk about the books that I read in February. And I will be completely honest, I did put off recording this video because I was so close to finishing an Agatha Christie book and I wanted to include it in this monthly wrap up. And since February was a little bit of a shorter month, I figured it would be okay if I just included that one in this wrap up video, since if it was a regular length month, I would have finished this one within the bounds of the month. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and just talk about the books that I read in February. So I only managed to finish 3 books this month, which is another reason why I wanted to include the Agatha Christie one, because you know, the more books that we can talk about, the better. So I ended up reading 2 romances and 1 Agatha Christie book, and they were all titles that I mentioned in my February TBR. I just was a little overzealous of what I would be able to finish in the month of February. I have been pretty busy this month, so that's another thing that added to me not really thinking about reading all of that much until it got to like the last week of February. And I was like, oh yeah, I should probably do some more reading. So yeah, that's why we don't have that many to talk about, but nonetheless, we're still going to go through each one that I read in the month of February because I really enjoyed all of the books that I read this month and I want to yap about them. So go ahead, grab yourself a little beverage, a little snack maybe, and let's tuck on in and talk about the books that I read in February. So just to talk a little bit about my progress towards my reading goals this year, even though I only read 3 books this month, I did enough reading in January to where I am still on track for the overall year. So I just gotta make sure that I'm keeping that pace so that I don't get too far behind like I did last year. And I'm really hopeful that that won't happen again this year, because to be fair, a lot of that had to do with some work stuff I was dealing with. So hopefully all of that is in the rearview mirror and we can just have a nice time reading books without being stressed out about work as well. So yeah, so far this year I've read 9 books. And that means that I am 18% of the way to my reading goal and I am ahead of the pace that I need to be making to meet that goal by 1 book. I have a page goal of 5,000 pages and I'm a little bit behind on that metric. I have read 478 pages so far this year and I need 358 more to catch back up to the progress that I should be making. And I did have a couple of physical books on my TBR for this month, but I just did not sit down and actually physically read any books this month. So hopefully we can change that in the month of March and I can make more dedicated time to sitting down and physically reading, or even just doing a little reading on my Kindle before bed. I honestly have not been using my Kindle all that much, so probably not a bad idea to try to make some progress in that realm as well. And I have figured out how to get Libby books from my library onto my Kindle. So I've successfully done it with 1 book. I have not started reading that book, but I did get it on my Kindle. So it is there and ready for me to read. And I believe I have about 2 weeks to finish that book. So we need to get going on that so that I can finish it and return it to my library. I do think having a time constraint like that with my books that I borrow from my library will probably help me get through some ebooks. So we're gonna test that out in the month of March and see how that goes. I do have an Abby Jimenez book currently downloaded and ready to go from my library, but as you all are probably aware, I do love Abby Jimenez, so that should be a fun light read to go through. And then as far as audiobook hours, I've currently listened to 84.98 hours worth of audiobooks, and that puts me ahead of the pace for the year by 1.42 hours. So we're pretty much dead on the audiobook side. So really it's just the page numbers that we're behind on. So hopefully we can make a little headway with that in the coming months. So the first book that I finished in the month of February was The Paradise Problem by Christina Lauren, and this was the February pick for my work book club, and I did enjoy this one quite a bit. It was not my favorite Christina Lauren book, however, so I did end up rating it 3.5 stars. I thought it was really cute. I really enjoyed the premise of it. I do enjoy a fake dating trope, and this one was also pretty funny as well. I think that the main qualms that I had with the book has nothing to do with the main characters. It's all the side characters. So the main love interests are Anna and Liam, and the whole premise is that Liam and Anna got married when they were in college, but they weren't actually a couple. Anna is basically under the impression that they have gotten fake married to obtain student housing. I believe the whole situation, as far as she knows, is that she has this friend whose name is Jake, and his older brother, who is in graduate school, has gotten an offer for some family housing, but he can only take the housing if he is married, if he has a family. And Anna is very broke and also in college, so they basically have a courthouse wedding just so they are legally married on paper and they can get this cheap student housing. And then 5 years later, Liam comes back to ask Anna to accompany him to a family wedding, because unbeknownst to Anna, another reason why Liam wanted to get married is because he is the heir to an extremely large grocery empire, and it was one of the stipulations of the releasing of his inheritance that he be married happily for 5 years, and then he would get full access to his trust. And a few months before they hit the 5-year mark and he has full access to his trust, his youngest sister is getting married on this beautiful private island in, I believe, like Indonesia, somewhere in that area in Southeast Asia. And Liam is expected to show up with his wife of 5 years, Anna. If he shows up without her, and if it is found out that they are not really together anymore, then the inheritance becomes null and void and he cannot access any of his money. So he offers to pay Anna to essentially just pretend that they have been happily married for 5 years in front of all of his family. And that is the basis of our fake dating premise for this book. And I did really enjoy this. I thought it was a very fun read. The author duo Christina Lauren does fake dating really well, in my opinion. Like, for example, my favorite book that I've read by Christina Lauren is The Unhoneymooners, and that is also a fake dating trope. So I know that they can do it quite well. I just enjoyed The Unhoneymooners a little bit more, and I think that's mostly because, again, the side characters in The Unhoneymooners just pushed it a little higher up for me than the side characters in The Paradise Problem. In The Unhoneymooners, the side characters are pretty funny. The main female love interest in that story has a very loud and very brash, close family, and they're always like popping in and just being a lot. And that adds some sort of like comic relief to the story. And in The Paradise Problem, Liam's family is just the worst. Like, they are so horrible. Even the siblings that you would hope that are a little less vapid than their parents are just as money hungry as the parents are, and that just kind of like made me more annoyed with them than anything else. And maybe that's just, you know, my class consciousness coming in and being, you know, adverse to rich people in general, but I do think that that was a factor in me rating it just a little bit lower. But I still enjoyed it. I still thought it was a solid romance. I still thought it was cute, and I did enjoy it overall. So 3.5 felt very comfortable for that one, and I would recommend it for a nice little summer romance read as well. Then the second book that I finished in February was Funny Story by Emily Henry, and this one literally had me laughing out loud. I don't know if any other Emily Henry books specifically have made me laugh that much while reading, but it was kind of on par for me with some of Abby Jimenez's books, like Yours Truly and Part of Your World. Both of those books made me laugh out loud, and Funny Story also did that for me as well. So that's always a plus, because there are so many books that are marketed as rom-coms where it's all rom, no com, and I like the funny. I like the silly little moments that make me giggle, and Funny Story did that for me as well. This is another fake dating trope, and it is, in fact, a funny story. So our main character, Daphne, is engaged to the love of her life, Peter. And Peter has a childhood best friend named Petra, who Daphne has always been kind of hesitant to trust. And even though Peter has told her many times over, you know, there's nothing between us, if we were interested in each other, we would have already been dating, but she is just not the one for me. And she trusts that. And then I believe it's when he goes on his bachelor party, she's there for some reason, and then she confesses her love for him, and he's like, you know what? I think I might love you too. And then breaks off their engagement. And basically when he comes home from his bachelor party, he essentially tells her that she needs to move out because Petra's moving in, and tells her, you know, you can stay on the couch as long as you need until you find a place. And she's like, I am not staying here with my ex-fiance and his new girlfriend slash best friend who he told me not to worry about. Like, that's not happening. Makes sense. And so the best solution that she can come up with is to move in to Petra's old apartment with her ex-boyfriend, Miles, who is equally as blindsided as she was about the whole situation. So I guess it's sort of like forced proximity too, because Miles is our main love interest for Daphne in this story, and they do live together, but they're basically just roommates for the first couple weeks. And I believe like 2 months after the bachelor party incident and Daphne moves in with Miles, that they both receive invitations to Peter and Petra's wedding. And they are both still reeling with heartache. Miles is in a state where he is rewatching rom-coms like Bridget Jones' Diary and just sobbing profusely. Daphne's not doing much better, and she's basically burying herself in her work at a public library. And then after they get these invitations for the wedding, she and Miles decide to go to a bar together to drown their sorrows in alcohol, and in their drunken stupor, they decide to RSVP to the wedding. The following day, when she's completely hungover, she gets a call from Peter. So Peter basically calls her and is like, you know, you don't have to come. I know it's probably hard for you, and I know it's hard to go to weddings alone. You know, I noticed that you didn't RSVP for a +1, so obviously you're coming alone, and if that's too much for you, don't feel like you have to show up. And then she lies to Peter and says, well, my date doesn't need a +1 because he was also invited, and tells him that she is dating Miles. And that's what sets off our whole fake dating trope. And, you know, as you would expect, there is some misconceptions on both sides about the other, you know, because Daphne has been told all of these things about Miles by Peter, and Peter doesn't necessarily see Miles in the best light, and vice versa with Daphne, kind of a similar thing. So even though they've known of each other for years, just being in proximity because their significant others were best friends, they don't really know each other. So now that they're fake dating, they gotta really quickly catch up, get to know each other, and that is where our romance takes off. And this one was very funny. I really enjoyed Miles as the main love interest. There's a whole like subplot of Daphne trying to make some new friends, and the side characters that are in Daphne and Miles's life, mainly Daphne's coworker slash new friend Ashley and Miles's little sister named Jules. They're both just very fun characters, and I feel like they add a lot to the story. And so overall, I did really enjoy this book. I ended up rating it a 4.5 just because I do think that Book Lovers on the romance side was just a little bit better for me. Now, I may reread Book Lovers and completely change my mind, but I'm going off of memory right now. So if at some point I reread Book Lovers and I adjust the star ratings, you'll know why. But as of right now, I have it at a 4.5. I think it was a very solid book, and the way that it ended was just so cute. I had a feeling through most of the book that there was going to be a pregnancy trope because the topic of parenthood got brought up several times. So I was like mentally preparing myself for that because, as I've said before on this channel, I'm not a big fan of pregnancy tropes. And so I was half expecting this book to just end with, you know, like they lived happily ever after and now they have a kid. But I was pleasantly surprised that it didn't go that route. Like, it was still a happily ever after, but it was more so focused on the happiness of the two individuals who have come together as a couple. And I just enjoy that a little bit more than the cliche, you know, and they all lived happily ever after with a yard full of kids. So I did appreciate that it didn't end with a pregnancy trope like I expected it to. And all in all, I really enjoyed how the book ended. I thought it was a very sweet and fitting ending for this story, and it had me just, you know, grinning like a fool by the end. So I feel like that's a good sign that it was a good ending, in my opinion. Alrighty friends, and then the last book that I finished in the month of February, which should be no surprise because I've already mentioned that I read an Agatha Christie book, it was Dumb Witness by Agatha Christie. This one was probably one of the Poirot mysteries that I was more invested in than some of the other ones. I feel like sometimes when I listen to a Poirot story, I kind of get bogged down in the details and I start to miss things because they just move really fast, especially if you're like me and you listen on increased speed. It's very easy to miss something. Because they are shorter books, and it is a flushed out story, there are constantly a lot of details being thrown around. And so sometimes I can feel like it's a little hard to follow along when you have so many characters with so many different stories that are constantly being thrown at you. But this one, I feel like for some reason I was just really on it when I was listening to it, and I was very invested. I don't know if that's because there is a dog that is a big part of this story. As you can probably tell from the cover, there's a dog on the cover. His name is Bob and he is so cute. I love him so much. He is probably my favorite character in this entire book, and he has like a whole plot line that ties from the beginning of the book straight up to the end of the book. And he's a good boy. Towards the beginning of the book, there is an accident that happens where someone falls down the stairs, and it is immediately blamed on Bob because one of Bob's favorite things to do is to take his little rubber ball that he loves to play with, put it at the top of the stairs and watch it like bounce down the stairs. And he just does that a lot. And so when someone falls down the stairs, people automatically assume, well, Bob must have just left his ball at the top of the stairs and that's how the accident happened. And so everything gets blamed on Bob at first. And then lo and behold, it's not Bob's fault. Bob is just, you know, being a good boy. And I really enjoy that Agatha Christie even gave him like a little inner monologue that Hastings, who is the narrator of this story, uses to interpret Bob's excitement when he sees new people and some of the thoughts that may be going through Bob's little brain. I'm a big dog lover, so anytime Bob's inner monologue was mentioned, or if people were having a conversation in the kitchen and they just mentioned, we could hear Bob's ball thumping down the stairs while we were talking, it just made me happy. And I really loved him in this book. I felt like he was a bit of comic relief for, you know, the murder that had happened in this book. But other than Bob, the main premise of this story is that there is this older wealthy woman who she doesn't have any kids of her own, but she has nieces and nephews by marriage who are gunning after her money. And then she passes away in a seemingly not very suspicious manner. However, she had written a letter to Poirot before she passed away, basically imploring him to help her because she is afraid that someone's gonna make an attempt on her life. However, unfortunately, it wasn't sent to Poirot until after she passed away because it was like tucked away in her writing case and one of her servants had mailed it out after her passing without really reading it. So by the time Poirot shows up, she has been dead for about 2 months. And, you know, the will has seemingly been settled, and most people around the death thought it was a pretty open and shut case, but you know, Poirot does his thing anyway and figures out that there's a bit more going on here than just a simple, you know, elderly woman succumbing to a sickness. And throughout the story, I was very suspicious of one specific character, and that ended up not being the perpetrator in the end. Though as the story went on, I eventually made my way to the correct suspect. However, the actual, like, plotting that went into this murder went far deeper than I anticipated, and it was a very fun reveal at the end. Even though I knew who the perpetrator was, I did not understand their full motives. I didn't understand how long they had been plotting to do this, and it just still made it a pretty fun experience even though I had figured out who the culprit was before the big reveal, because I didn't put together all of the details that had been sprinkled in throughout the book. So I ended up rating this one 4 stars because I thought it was a really good mystery, and I do think that this is going to be one that I will think about whenever I'm talking about Agatha Christie stories, and it will probably stick in my mind a little bit more than some of the other ones. But I also think that there are a few more that were slightly better or that I enjoyed a bit more for whatever reason, whether it be because of the plot, because of the characters. So I just want to make sure that I leave a little wiggle room on both sides. But I did really enjoy this book, and I would recommend it to anyone who is into classic whodunits or murder mysteries a la Agatha Christie. But yeah, that is pretty much it for the books that I read in February. I did thoroughly enjoy all of the books that I read this month, and I look forward to diving into some more in the month of March. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, go ahead and leave a like down below. Let me know. You should also subscribe while you're down there because I put out new bookish content pretty much every weekend. If you have any book suggestions or things you think that I should pick up and read, go ahead and leave those in a comment down below. The list of books that I would like to read is quite long, but I'm always willing to take suggestions from other people, and I'm very much a mood reader, so if you recommend me a title now and I find the premise very interesting, I will probably push it up to the front of my TBR line. I hope you guys have a wonderful day wherever you are in the world, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!